These are the men who turned street crime into business and whose nicknames told their stories. From bosses who looked like bankers to killers who left no trace, every name carried a reputation. In this era, a nickname was more than identity. It was power. He was born Angelo Joseph LaPietra on October 30th, 1920 in Chicago's Near West Side, a neighborhood where the line between hard work and hustling blurred fast. His parents were Italian immigrants from Naples. They came for opportunity. What their son found instead was power. By the late 1930s, LaPietra was already on the police radar: assault, robbery, narcotics. He was part of a generation of street enforcers who learned the trade the Chicago way: cash, muscle, and silence. When Prohibition ended, the rackets didn't stop. They evolved, and Angelo LaPietra was there to take his share. He came up under the outfit's Cicero crew, the same faction that ran the West Side gambling joints and later controlled the Las Vegas Skim. He kept close ties to Joseph Aiuppa, one of the outfit's most powerful bosses. Aiuppa trusted him. He made LaPietra the outfit's man in the First Ward, the piece of Chicago where politics, money, and organized crime met behind closed doors. His reputation grew fast. They called him the Hook. Some said the name came from how he dealt with debtors, men who didn't pay on time and ended up hanging from meat hooks in warehouse basements. Others said the name had a different meaning, that once you borrowed money from LaPietra, he had his hooks in you for good. Either way, it meant control. Through the 1970s and 1980s, LaPietra ran a vast loan sharking network. Bar owners, bookmakers, businessmen, anyone short on cash came to him. The interest was crushing. The consequences were worse. But LaPietra wasn't only muscle, he was a strategist. He understood how to move money, how to invest in casinos and construction, and how to keep politicians in his pocket. His name surfaced in federal investigations tied to the Las Vegas casino Skim, a scheme where millions were quietly siphoned from casino profits before the books ever saw them. He was part of that quiet class of outfit bosses who rarely appeared in newspapers but made decisions that shaped the organization's future. By the time the government caught up, he'd already survived half a century in the shadows. He served time, but never broke. When he came out, he returned to the same neighborhoods that had built him. Angelo LaPietra died on March 28, 1999. He was 78 years old. To law enforcement, he was a ruthless enforcer. To the men who worked under him, he was steady, calculating, and unflinching. To Chicago, he was a reminder of how deep the outfit's roots ran, and how some hooks, once set, never come out. He was born Giuseppe Antonio DOTO on November 22, 1902 in Montemerano, Italy, a small town in the province of Avellino. His family came to America when he was still a child, settling in Brooklyn, New York. Like many young Italian immigrants in the early 1900s, DOTO grew up surrounded by poverty, ambition, and the rough rules of the street. By his teens, he'd joined local gangs in Brooklyn, running errands, stealing cars, and learning the business of illegal gambling. But DOTO was different from the average street tough. He was polished, neat, good-looking, and always immaculately dressed. That's where the name came from. Joe Adonis. Some said he gave it to himself, borrowing from the myth of Adonis, the symbol of male beauty. Others said the name came from the neighborhood, a backhanded compliment from men who noticed how much he admired his own reflection. Either way, the nickname stuck, and like everything else in his life, Joe made it work to his advantage. By the 1920s, Adonis was working closely with two rising figures, Charles Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. Together, they helped reshape the structure of organized crime in America. Adonis played a key role in bootlegging and gambling operations during Prohibition, controlling clubs and speakeasies across New York and New Jersey. He wasn't as famous as Luciano, but he was a trusted ally. When Luciano formed the National Crime Syndicate in the early 1930s, a nationwide network of organized crime families, Adonis was part of the inner circle. He was there during the Castellano War, the bloody power struggle that ended the old guard of the Mafia and ushered in a new era of business over tradition. Adonis kept a lower profile than some of his contemporaries. He preferred the background, money, influence, and control without headlines. Still, law enforcement knew who he was. Through the 1940s, he controlled gambling rackets in New Jersey and Manhattan, and had strong political connections. He was often seen at Luciano's side, even after Luciano's imprisonment and deportation. In 1951, Adonis was called before the Kefauver Committee, the Senate investigation into organized crime. He denied everything, but soon after, immigration authorities discovered he had never become a U.S. citizen. Facing deportation, Adonis claimed he wanted to stay, but in 1956, he voluntarily left for Italy rather than face forced removal. He settled in Milan, where he lived quietly under the radar, still wealthy, still connected, but far from the streets that made his name. Joseph Joe Adonis DOTO died in Italy on November 26, 1971, at the age of 69. To the end, he remained a symbol of the early American Mafia, elegant, loyal, and quietly ruthless. A man who treated crime like business, an image like armor. He was born Joseph John Aiuppa on December 1, 1907, in Melrose Park, Illinois, a working-class suburb west of Chicago. His parents were Italian immigrants from the province of Altavilla Irpina. Like a lot of kids in that neighborhood, Joey grew up surrounded by the shadow of the Chicago outfit, the mix of street rackets, union muscle, and quiet men who ran the city behind closed doors. He started small, running slot machines, delivering beer during Prohibition, and learning how to handle himself around mob figures who'd come up under Al Capone. By the 1930s, Aiuppa was managing gambling joints in Cicero, the outfit's home turf. He kept his head down, made money, and followed orders. The nickname Joey O'Brien came from those early days. When law enforcement started cracking down on Italians in organized crime, Aiuppa began signing documents and using business fronts under the Irish-sounding name O'Brien. It was a way to hide in plain sight, and it worked. His other nickname, Joey Doves, came later, and for once, it wasn't about crime. In 1962, federal agents caught him transporting 563 live mourning doves across state lines, a violation of wildlife laws. He was fined and sentenced to 3 months in jail. The press had a field day. From then on, everyone in Chicago called him Joey Doves. Aiuppa didn't like it, but he laughed it off. In his world, a joke was better than a headline. By the 1950s and 60s, Aiuppa had climbed to the top tier of the outfit. He managed Cicero's Town Hotel, a notorious gambling and brothel operation that funneled profits straight to the mob's leadership. Behind the scenes, he was one of the outfit's top earners, controlling illegal casinos, bookmaking, and later a stake in Las Vegas. In the 1970s, Aiuppa became the boss of the Chicago outfit, succeeding Sam Giancana and Tony Accardo's generation of leaders. Where Giancana had been loud and flashy, Aiuppa was quiet and practical. He preferred meetings to parties, led through discipline, and believed in keeping the FBI guessing. Under his rule, the outfit ran Chicago's unions, casinos, and construction rackets with a cold efficiency. But Vegas was where the real money came from, and where the trouble began. Federal investigators uncovered a massive casino skimming operation in which millions were taken from Las Vegas casinos before the profits were reported. The FBI's strawman investigation linked Aiuppa to the scheme. In 1986, he was convicted of skimming from the Stardust and Fremont casinos and sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. Rumors swirled that Aiuppa ordered the 1975 murder of Sam Giancana, possibly to silence him before the CIA hearings about Cuba. Law enforcement never proved it, but the timing fit the outfit's need for control, and Aiuppa's reputation for handling problems quietly. He served over a decade in prison before being released in 1996. By then, he was nearly 90, frail but still sharp. He returned to the Chicago suburbs where he lived out his final years under the radar. Joseph Joey Doves Aiuppa died on February 22, 1997 at age 89. To outsiders, he was the aging mobster who once smuggled birds. To Chicago, he was the quiet boss who ran the outfit like a business empire, No glamour, no noise, just results. And to the men who worked for him, he was what every soldier wanted in a leader. Steady hands, few words, and a memory that never forgot a debt. He was born Constantino Paul Castellano on June 26, 1915 in Brooklyn, New York, the son of Italian immigrants from Sicily. His father was a butcher. His mother ran the house. Castellano learned early that control, not chaos, kept a family together. That lesson stayed with him, even when his family became one of the most powerful criminal organizations in America. He was Carlo Gambino's cousin, and that connection mattered. While many young gangsters came up through the streets, Castellano moved through the kitchens and offices. He learned business, construction, meat distribution, unions. He understood the value of a contract better than a gun. In the 1950s and 60s, as the Gambino family grew into the largest of New York's 5 families, Castellano built wealth quietly. He ran legitimate fronts, Dial Poultry, Scaramix Concrete, and used them to funnel illegal profits from labor racketeering, extortion, and construction deals. The money gave him status. The suits, the mansion on Todd Hill in Staten Island, and the way he carried himself gave him his nickname, Big Paul. Inside the outfit, others called him something else, the Pope. It was half respect, half sarcasm. Castellano ruled with distance. He wanted to be treated like a statesman, not a street boss. He rarely met soldiers in person. He expected his orders to flow through captains like scripture. To men raised on loyalty and blood, it felt cold, almost holy. When Carlo Gambino died in 1976, everyone expected his underboss, Agnello Della Croce, to take over. Instead, Gambino named Castellano boss. Della Croce accepted it, but the family split in two, Castellano's white-collar faction and Della Croce's blue-collar soldiers, led by a rising figure from Queens named John Gotti. Through the late 1970s and early 1980s, Castellano focused on business. He built a network in the construction unions, took a cut from every concrete job in Manhattan, and even dealt in stolen electronics. He was cautious and obsessed with appearances. He forbade drug dealing, not out of morality, but because it drew federal heat. Still, many of his men ignored him. By 1984, the FBI was closing in. Agents bugged his Staten Island home, recording Castellano discussing kickbacks, mob politics, even murders. That same year, he was indicted in the Commission case, a federal prosecution aimed at dismantling the Mafia's leadership. Inside his own family, resentment grew. Gotti and others saw him as out of touch, a man living like a CEO while soldiers risked prison. Castellano made it worse when he refused to attend Della Croce's funeral in December 1985. That single act broke whatever respect remained. 4 days later, on December 16, 1985, Paul Castellano pulled up outside Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. It was early evening, crowded with holiday shoppers. As he stepped out of his black Lincoln with his driver, Thomas Bellotti, gunmen waited on the sidewalk. In seconds, both men were dead, shot multiple times in a coordinated hit. The man behind it was John Gotti. Within days, he was the new boss of the Gambino family. Paul Big Paul Castellano was buried quietly in Staten Island. To some, he was the businessman who tried to modernize the mob. To others, he was the last of the old bosses, the man who thought he could run a crime family like a corporation. In the end, the street reminded him who really held power. He was born Maya Harris Cohen on September 4, 1913 in Brooklyn, New York, the son of Jewish immigrants from Ukraine. His father died when he was a baby, and his mother raised 7 children on her own. By the time Mickey was a teenager, the family had moved to Los Angeles. The city was sunny, but his life wasn't. Poverty and crime traveled with him. Cohen started hustling early, selling newspapers, running errands, and fighting in the streets. He was tough and fearless. By 16, he was a professional boxer, fighting under the name Irish Mickey Cohen. The nickname came from the ring announcers who thought a Jewish kid from Brooklyn wouldn't sell tickets in Irish heavy fight towns. Mickey didn't mind. He liked the sound of it. Sharp, memorable, and tough. He boxed his way through Cleveland, Denver, and eventually back to Los Angeles. But it wasn't the ring that made him famous, it was what came after. In the early 1930s, while fighting in Cleveland, Cohen met Lou Rothkopf and Mo Dalitz, men tied to the Mayfield Road Mob, a powerful Jewish crime outfit. They liked Mickey's nerve and his fists. When Prohibition ended, Cohen's boxing career faded, but his criminal one took off. By the 1940s, he was working for Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, the East Coast mobster sent west to expand the syndicate's gambling operations. Siegel saw potential in Mickey, muscle with brains. He made Cohen his lieutenant in Los Angeles, overseeing bookmaking, extortion, and the flow of illegal bets across the city. When Siegel opened the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, Cohen helped manage its operations and protection. In June 1947, Siegel was murdered in Beverly Hills, shot through the window of his girlfriend's house. Mickey Cohen was furious. He swore revenge, accusing mob bosses back east of betrayal. But in the world he lived in, revenge had limits. Cohen didn't have the power to challenge the syndicate, so he built his own. Through the late 1940s and early 1950s, Cohen ruled Los Angeles like a crime czar. He ran gambling rackets, controlled bookmakers, and rubbed shoulders with Hollywood celebrities. He dressed like a movie star, hand-tailored suits, silk ties, diamonds, and expensive cars. The press loved him. They called him Gangster Mickey. He gave interviews, posed for photos, and turned himself into a headline. But fame has a price. Cohen survived bombings, assassination attempts, and federal investigations. In 1949, a small war broke out on LA's streets, shootouts between Cohen's crew and rival gangsters trying to take over his rackets. The newspapers turned it into spectacle. The police turned it into a crusade. In 1951, Mickey was convicted of tax evasion and sent to Alcatraz. He served time, was released, and went back again in the early 1960s after another tax case. During one stint, he was attacked in prison, beaten with a lead pipe so badly that part of his scalp never fully healed. When he got out, the old Los Angeles he ruled was gone. The new bosses were quieter, the spotlight moved on, and Mickey was left with his memories and his myth. Maya Mickey Cohen died on July 29, 1976, in Los Angeles from stomach cancer. He was 62. He'd once called himself a businessman with guts. To the city he left behind, he was more than that. The loudest, flashiest face of organized crime in Hollywood's golden age. A man who treated Los Angeles like a stage and himself as the star who could never quite walk off. He was born Antonino Leonardo Accardo on April 28, 1906, in Chicago, Illinois, the son of Sicilian immigrants from Trapani. His father was a shoemaker. His mother kept the home. They lived in a working-class neighborhood where opportunity was scarce, and the outfit was already part of the city's bloodstream. By his teens, Accardo had dropped out of school and joined a local street gang that fed into the organization run by Johnny Torrio and Al Capone. He was quiet, observant, and loyal, the kind of man the outfit valued. By the mid-1920s, he was working directly under Capone, running errands, guarding shipments, and handling the occasional act of violence. The name Big Tuna came much later, after the violence was long behind him. In the early 1960s, after a successful fishing trip off the California coast, newspapers ran a photo of Accardo posing proudly beside a massive tuna he'd caught. The headline called him the Big Tuna of the Chicago outfit, and the name stuck. He didn't like it, but he never bothered to correct it. In his early years, though, nobody called him Big Tuna. They called him Joe Batters, a nickname given by Capone himself. According to legend, Capone watched Accardo beat two traitors to death with a baseball bat and said, "That kid's a real Joe Batters." From then on, Accardo was part of Capone's trusted inner circle, a soldier who never talked, never bragged, and never made mistakes. When Capone went to prison in 1931, Frank Nitti took over, and Accardo continued to rise. Through the 1930s and 1940s, he moved from muscle to management, bootlegging, gambling, and labor racketeering. He oversaw territory, enforced discipline, and learned the art of quiet power. By the late 1940s, after Nitty's suicide and Paul Ricker's conviction, Tony Accardo became the boss of the Chicago outfit. Unlike Capone, he avoided headlines. He didn't chase fame or photographs. He ran the outfit like a corporation, expanding into Las Vegas casinos, the National Wire Service, and legitimate businesses that kept money flowing and attention low. He lived modestly in River Forest, Illinois, in a mansion that symbolized quiet wealth. No champagne, no crowds, just routine, control, and silence. Law enforcement often said he was the smartest mob boss they ever faced. He never spent a single night in jail on a major conviction. By the 1950s, he handed daily operations to Sam Giancana, but remained the power behind the throne. Even after Momo fell from grace, Accardo stayed the steady hand, advising, approving, ensuring continuity. The outfit's influence in Chicago politics, unions, and casinos never disappeared under his watch. When burglars once broke into his home in the 1970s, several of them turned up dead in gruesome fashion. Nobody doubted the message. Some rules never changed. Anthony Big Tuna Accardo died of natural causes on May the 22nd, 1992, at his home in Barrington Hills, Illinois. He was 86. He outlived nearly everyone from the Capone era, and he outsmarted them too. No public trials, no prison time, just a lifetime of quiet control, power exercised in whispers, and a legacy that stretched from the backrooms of Chicago to the casino floors of Las Vegas. In the long history of the American mob, Big Tuna wasn't the loudest or the bloodiest. He was the one who survived by making crime look like order. He was born Bernardo Provenzano on January 31st, 1933 in Corleone, Sicily, a town whose name would later become shorthand for the Mafia itself. His father was a farmer. The family lived poor, simple, and far from power. But the young Provenzano wasn't drawn to farming. He was drawn to fear and the men who knew how to use it. By his teens, he joined the local mafia under Luciano Leggio, a brutal boss who was building his own power base in Corleone. Provenzano's closest ally was another young killer, Salvatore Riina, Toto. Together, they became Leggio's enforcers. They were quiet, obedient, and deadly. When Leggio wanted someone gone, Provenzano didn't hesitate. His method was clean and efficient, which earned him his first nickname, Binu u Tratturi, Binu the Tractor. It came from the way he handled enemies, unstoppable, mechanical, and remorseless. As one old mafioso said, when Provenzano moves, he crushes everything in his path. In 1958, Provenzano took part in the murder of Michele Navarra, a powerful doctor and mafia boss who stood in Leggio's way. The hit marked the beginning of the Corleonese's rise, the violent faction from the countryside that would one day control the entire Sicilian mafia. But it also made Provenzano a wanted man. By the early 1960s, he vanished underground. From that point on, Provenzano lived like a ghost. While Leggio and later Riina led the Corleonese through a bloody mafia war, killing rivals, judges, and even politicians, Provenzano was always in the background, organizing, planning, and counting. His strength wasn't in brutality anymore, it was in strategy. That's where his other nickname came from, the Accountant. Provenzano was methodical. He kept coded notes called pizzini, small slips of paper that carried orders, instructions, and financial records. No phones, no meetings. Every message moved by hand. Under his system, the mafia became quieter, more disciplined, harder to detect. When Toto Riina was arrested in 1993, Provenzano took control of the Sicilian mafia, or Cosa Nostra. He ended the open war that had drawn too much attention and shifted the organization back to its old rule: money before murder. Under his leadership, the Corleonese moved deep into legitimate businesses, construction, agriculture, and public contracts. He preferred bribery to bombs, silence to blood. For more than 40 years, Provenzano remained a fugitive. He never left Sicily, yet no one could find him. He lived in small houses across the countryside, communicating through his pizzini, trusted by a generation of men who never once saw his face. On April 11th, 2006, Italian police finally caught him in a farmhouse outside Corleone. He was 73 years old, living under a false name, surrounded by notebooks, coded letters, and old religious books. After decades on the run, the tractor had broken down. Provenzano was convicted of multiple murders and sentenced to life in prison. Even then, he barely spoke. The same quiet that had kept him alive for half a century now followed him into a cell. He died on July 13th, 2016, in a prison hospital in Milan. He was 83. To the world, Bernardo the Tractor Provenzano was the invisible hand of Cosa Nostra, the man who turned a war machine into a business empire. To his men, he was the boss who proved that power didn't need to shout. It only needed to whisper and keep perfect books. He was born Salvatore Giancana on June the 15th, 1908 in Chicago, Illinois, the son of Sicilian immigrants who worked hard and kept quiet. His father owned a small bakery on the city's west side. The family name meant nothing then, but in the alleys behind that bakery, young Sal learned how fear worked, how it could move people faster than money ever could. As a kid, he ran with a neighborhood gang called the 42 Gang, a group of young thieves and wheelmen who specialized in stealing cars and hijacking trucks. They were wild, reckless, and ambitious. Sal stood out for his nerve and his temper. That's where the first nickname came from, Mooney, meaning crazy. The name stuck because he could snap from calm to violence in a blink. His friends called him Momo. By the 1920s, the 42 Gang had caught the attention of Al Capone's Chicago outfit. The young punks could drive, shoot, and keep their mouths shut. Giancana became a wheelman for Capone's bootlegging operations, running whiskey through the city. After Capone's fall, he worked under Tony Accardo and Paul Ricker, two men who valued discipline and discretion. They saw something in Giancana, a mix of street instinct and organizational skill. Through the 1940s, he rose fast. He handled the outfit's policy racket, an illegal lottery that brought in millions from Chicago's black neighborhoods. He ruled it with a mix of brutality and charm, bribing politicians, killing rivals, and making sure the money always flowed upward. By 1957, Accardo stepped back from public leadership, and Sam Giancana became boss. Under him, the outfit expanded beyond Chicago. They invested in Las Vegas casinos, Hollywood studios, and international gambling ventures. Giancana lived like a celebrity, sharp suits, flashy cars, and high-profile romances with singers and actresses. He dined at the Pump Room, drank with Frank Sinatra, and became a fixture in the same circles as the stars who pretended men like him didn't exist. But glamour came with exposure. The FBI bugged his phones and tailed his car. They called him Momo in their files, short for Moonstruck, a reflection of his volatility. He relished the attention, but behind the flash was something darker. Declassified files later revealed Giancana's alleged ties to the CIA. During the early 1960s, US intelligence reportedly sought mob help to assassinate Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Giancana's connections and overseas networks made him useful. It was a strange intersection, organized crime and national security sharing the same table, both playing a game where deniability was everything. At the same time, Giancana's personal life spiraled. His affair with singer Phyllis McGuire made headlines, and his temper alienated his own men. When his arrogance started to cost business, Accardo pulled him back from power. In 1966, after a brief jail term for contempt of court, Giancana fled to Mexico, living in exile for nearly a decade. By the mid-1970s, he returned to Chicago under promise of cooperation with federal investigators. He was scheduled to testify before a grand jury about CIA activities and the outfit's business in Latin America. But he never made it that far. On June 19th, 1975, Giancana was found dead in the basement of his Oak Park home. He'd been shot 7 times in the face and neck while cooking sausage and peppers. The killer was never found. Salvatore Sam Giancana, Mooney, Momo, the flamboyant boss of Chicago, died the way he lived, between power and paranoia, between the street and the spotlight. To the underworld, he was the man who took the outfit global. To the government, he was a ghost that knew too much. And to history, he remains a reminder that in Chicago, the mob didn't fade. It adapted, dressed better, and learned to smile for the cameras.